The blood on Owen Walker's hands had long since dried by the time he nudged open the door to his cabin with his shoulder, exhaustion weighing down every muscle in his body like stones in a riverbed. He expected darkness, maybe the lingering smell of coffee from that morning, but instead golden lamplight spilled across the worn floorboards, and the aroma of roasted chicken and fresh bread made his stomach clench with sudden hunger. His eyes swept the small room, taking in the carefully set table with 2 plates, the covered dishes still steaming faintly in the October chill. And then he saw her, head pillowed on her folded arms at his table, dark auburn hair falling like a curtain across her face, fast asleep. Owen stood frozen in the doorway of his cabin just outside Oroville, California, this year of 1878 bringing more complications than he had bargained for when he had taken the job as deputy 3 months back. The woman at his table was Rose Sullivan, and seeing her there made his heart do something painful in his chest that he had been trying to ignore for weeks now. He closed the door quietly behind him, setting his rifle against the wall with careful movements, not wanting to wake her just yet because the sight of her here in his space, waiting for him, was something he needed a moment to absorb. She had come to Oroville in late August on the stagecoach, traveling alone with just 2 carpet bags and a determined set to her jaw that had caught his attention immediately. Rose had rented a room above the general store and opened a small seamstress shop, her fingers quick and skilled with needle and thread. The town's women had flocked to her, grateful for someone who could take in a dress or mend a shirt with actual talent instead of just making do. Owen had first spoken to her when he had torn his good shirt on a fence post, and Mrs. Henderson at the boarding house had sent him to Rose, insisting she could make it look like new. He remembered walking into that little shop, hat in his hands, feeling suddenly awkward in a way he had not felt since he was a green boy of 16. Rose had looked up from her sewing, and her eyes, the color of spring grass after rain, had met his with a directness that had made him forget what he had come to say. She had smiled, just a small curve of her lips, and asked if she could help him. Her voice had been soft but clear, with an accent that spoke of Boston or somewhere back east, refined but not pretentious. That had been the beginning. He had found excuses to walk past her shop, to check that her door was locked at night during his rounds, to ask if she had seen anything unusual, as if Oroville was some dangerous den of outlaws instead of a mostly peaceful mining town. She had seemed amused by his attention, but not unwelcoming. They had started talking, real conversations that stretched longer each time, about her life before Oroville, about his work, about the way the Sierra Nevada mountains turned purple at sunset. Rose had told him in pieces about why she had come west. She had been engaged back in Massachusetts to a man her parents had chosen, a banker's son with soft hands and hard eyes. She had realized 6 weeks before the wedding that marrying him would be like stepping into a cage, and she had taken her savings and left in the night. Her parents had disowned her through a terse letter that had arrived 2 weeks after she settled in Oroville. Owen had seen the pain in her eyes when she mentioned it, but also the steel underneath. Rose Sullivan was not a woman who made choices lightly, and she did not regret them even when they cost her dearly. For his part, Owen had shared pieces of his own history. He was 26, had been working as a lawman for 4 years, first in Nevada and then here in California. His parents had died of fever when he was 19, leaving him and his younger sister alone. His sister had married a good man and moved to San Francisco, and Owen had drifted for a while before finding his purpose in keeping the peace. He was good at it, patient and fair, not quick to draw his gun but capable when he needed to be. The attraction between them had grown like wildfire in dry grass, but Owen had been careful, respectful. Rose was a lady, and she was alone in a rough town without family to protect her reputation. He had not wanted to cause talk that might hurt her business or her standing. So he had kept his distance even as every instinct screamed at him to pull her close, to kiss her, to tell her that she had become the last thing he thought about before sleeping and the first thing on his mind when he woke. But Rose, it seemed, had grown tired of his careful distance. 3 days ago, she had invited him to dinner at her rooms above the store, and he had accepted, his heart hammering like he was facing down an armed outlaw, instead of a slip of a woman who barely reached his shoulder. She had cooked for him, a simple meal of stew and bread, and they had talked until the candles burned low. When he had left that night, she had touched his hand, her fingers lingering on his, and said softly that she enjoyed his company more than she could properly express. He had been walking on air since then, distracted and foolish, grinning at nothing. The sheriff had noticed and ribbed him mercilessly about it. Owen had not cared. Yesterday Rose had stopped by the jail during his shift and asked, with a pretty flush on her cheeks, if he would come to dinner tonight at his own cabin. She knew where he lived. Everyone in town knew where everyone lived, and she said she wanted to cook for him properly, with more space and time than her little room allowed. He had agreed immediately, his mind already racing ahead to what it might mean that she wanted to come to his home, to be alone with him there. But then today had gone to hell in the way that days sometimes did. A mine shaft had collapsed at one of the claims north of town, trapping 3 men. Owen and the sheriff and half the able-bodied men in Oroville had ridden out at dawn to help with the rescue. It had taken all day, digging through rock and timber, praying they would reach the men before their air ran out. They had gotten them out alive, all 3, dirty and bruised and shaken but breathing. It had been nearly 9 at night by the time Owen had made it back to town, his whole body aching, his clothes filthy with rock dust and sweat. He had completely forgotten about Rose, about dinner, about everything except the relief of seeing those miners handed over to the doctor's care. And now here she was, asleep at his table, waiting for him. Owen moved closer, his boots silent on the floor. Up close he could see the dark circles under her eyes, the way her shoulders curved inward as if she had been fighting to stay awake for a long time before exhaustion won. The food on the table was cold now, the candles burned down to stubs. She had waited for hours. Guilt twisted in his gut, sharp and unpleasant. She had done this for him, come to his home and cooked and waited, and he had not even sent word that he would be late. He reached out, hesitating, then let his fingers brush her shoulder gently. "Rose," he said quietly. "Rose, wake up." She stirred, a small, confused sound escaping her throat, and then her head lifted and she blinked at him with sleepy, disoriented eyes. For a moment she just stared, and then awareness flooded back and she straightened abruptly, wincing as her neck protested the movement. "Owen," she said, her voice rough with sleep. "You are home. I must have dozed off." "I am so sorry," he said immediately, crouching beside her chair so they were at eye level. "There was an accident at the mines and I completely lost track of time. I should have sent someone to tell you." Rose shook her head, pressing her fingers to her temples as if to clear the fog of sleep. "No, it is all right. I heard about the collapse. Mrs. Henderson came by earlier and told me. She said you rode out with the rescue party." Her eyes focused on him, taking in his filthy clothes, the exhaustion in his face. "Are the men alive?" "Yes," he said. "All 3, we got them out." Something softened in her expression, a warmth that made his breath catch. "Then you were exactly where you needed to be," she said. "I am glad they are safe. "You waited," he said, the words coming out rougher than he intended. "You made all this and you waited for me." A faint blush colored her cheeks, visible even in the lamplight. "I wanted to," she said simply. "I wanted to do something for you, Owen. You have been so kind to me since I arrived here, and I thought perhaps I could make you a proper meal." She glanced at the table with a rueful smile. "Though it is rather cold now, I am afraid." Owen looked at the spread she had prepared. Roasted chicken with herbs, potatoes, carrots, fresh bread that she must have baked herself, even a pie sitting on the counter. It was more food than he usually saw in a week, prepared with obvious care. The sight of it, combined with the knowledge that she had sat here alone for hours waiting for him, made emotion swell in his throat until he could barely speak. "It is the best meal anyone has ever made for me," he said, and meant it absolutely, cold or not. Rose laughed, a soft sound that wrapped around him like a blanket. "You have not even tasted it yet." "Does not matter," he said. He reached out and took her hand, folding her slender fingers in his larger, calloused ones. "Rose, I need to ask you something." Her eyes widened slightly, but she did not pull away. "All right." "Why did you come here tonight?" he asked. "Really come here to my home instead of inviting me to yours again?" She was quiet for a moment, her gaze dropping to their joined hands. When she spoke, her voice was steady, but he could hear the vulnerability underneath. "Because I wanted you to know how I feel," she said. "I am not a woman who plays games or hints at things, Owen. Where I come from, ladies are supposed to wait demurely for men to make every move to declare themselves first, but I find I do not have the patience for that." She looked up at him, her green eyes direct and honest. "I care for you, more than I have cared for any man. And I wanted to show you, to be here in your space and make it clear that I am not afraid of what people might say or think." Owen's heart was thundering so hard he was surprised she could not hear it. "People will talk," he said. "You know they will. A single woman coming to a single man's home." "Let them," she said with a flash of the determination he had seen that first day. "I did not come across a continent to be free only to cage myself with propriety. I came here tonight because I wanted to, because you matter to me, and if that scandalizes the gossips, then so be it." He had been trying so hard to be careful, to protect her, but hearing her say those words shattered the last of his restraint. Owen stood, pulling her up with him, and then his hands were framing her face and he was kissing her with all the pent-up longing of the past months. Rose made a small sound of surprise, and then she was kissing him back, her arms coming up to wrap around his neck, her body pressing against his. She was soft and warm, and she tasted like hope, like coming home after a long journey. Owen kissed her until they were both breathless, until his head was spinning, and his chest felt too full to contain everything he was feeling. When they finally broke apart, Rose's eyes were bright and her lips were pink, and Owen knew with absolute certainty that he was going to marry this woman or die trying. "I am filthy," he said, suddenly aware of the state he was in. "I should not have grabbed you like that. I have probably covered you in dust." Rose laughed, touching his face with gentle fingers. "I do not care," she said. "Though you might want to wash up before we eat, I can warm the food while you do." Owen nodded, still dazed, and moved to the basin in the corner. He stripped off his shirt, acutely aware of Rose moving around his kitchen, stoking the fire in the stove, humming softly to herself. It felt domestic and intimate, and absolutely right in a way that made his throat tight. He washed quickly, scrubbing away the worst of the grime, and pulled on a clean shirt from his trunk. When he turned back, Rose had the food warming and was setting fresh candles on the table. She looked up at him and smiled, and Owen felt something settle in his chest, something that had been restless and searching for as long as he could remember. They sat down to eat together, and despite the late hour and the cold food now warming, it was one of the best meals of Owen's life. They talked as they ate, the conversation flowing easily between them. Rose told him about learning to cook from her grandmother, the only member of her family who had supported her decision to leave. Owen told her about his sister's letters from San Francisco, about the niece he had never met who was now almost 2 years old. "You miss her?" Rose asked. "Your sister?" "Every day," Owen admitted, "but she is happy and that matters most. She writes that I should come visit, but it is hard to get away." "Perhaps someday we could go together," Rose said, and then blushed as if realizing the presumption in that statement. Owen reached across the table and took her hand. "I would like that," he said. "I would like that very much." They finished eating and Rose tried to insist on cleaning up, but Owen would not hear of it. "You cooked and waited for hours," he said firmly. "The least I can do is wash a few dishes." "Then I will help," she countered, and they ended up side by side at the basin, her washing and him drying, their shoulders bumping companionably. It was such a simple thing, such an ordinary domestic task, but it felt significant somehow, like a glimpse into a possible future. When they were done, Owen walked Rose back to the table and they sat together on the bench, close enough that their thighs touched. The cabin was warm now from the stove, the lamplight soft and golden. Outside the October wind rattled the shutters, but inside it was peaceful and quiet. "Rose," Owen said, taking both her hands in his, "I need you to know that my intentions are serious. I am not playing at anything here. I want to court you properly with the aim of marriage if you will have me." Rose's eyes shimmered with tears, but she was smiling. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes to all of it." "I am not a rich man," Owen continued, needing to lay it all out honestly. "I make a deputy's salary and I have this cabin and a decent horse. I have some savings put by, but I will never be able to give you the kind of life you could have had back east." "I do not want that life," Rose said fiercely. "I never did. I want a life where I can choose, where I can breathe, where I can be with someone who sees me as a partner and not a possession. I want you, Owen Walker, exactly as you are." He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring it. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers, breathing her in. "I am going to do this right," he murmured. "I am going to court you and make sure everyone in town knows my intentions are honorable. And then I am going to marry you if you will still have me when I ask properly." "I will still have you," Rose whispered. "I promise." They sat together for a long time, talking and stealing kisses, learning the feel of being close to each other. Eventually, though, Owen noticed Rose trying to stifle a yawn and he insisted on walking her back to town. She protested, saying it was late and he had to be exhausted from the rescue, but he was immovable. "I am not letting you walk alone at night," he said, "and that is final." Rose smiled and relented, gathering her shawl and the empty dishes she had brought the food in. Owen helped her, loading everything into the basket she had carried it all in, and then they stepped out into the chilly October night. The walk back to town was short, barely 15 minutes, but Owen treasured every moment of it. They walked close together, Rose's hand tucked into the crook of his arm, their breath misting in the cold air. The stars overhead were brilliant, the Milky Way a river of light across the black sky. When they reached the general store, Owen walked her up the outside stairs to her door. At the threshold, Rose turned to face him, her face tilted up to his in the moonlight. "Thank you for tonight," she said softly. "Even though it did not go as planned, it was perfect." "Thank you for waiting for me," Owen said, "for being patient, for being brave enough to come to my home and show me how you felt." He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs stroking her cheekbones. "I will do everything I can to be worthy of you, Rose Sullivan." "You already are," she said, and kissed him one more time, soft and sweet. Owen waited until she was safely inside. The door locked behind her before he turned and walked back through the quiet streets of Oroville. His body still ached with exhaustion, but his heart felt lighter than it had in years. He had come west looking for purpose, for a way to make a difference, and he had found that in his work. But he had also found something he had not been looking for, something more precious than gold or glory. He had found a woman who matched him, who challenged him, who made him want to be better than he was. The next morning Owen woke early despite the late night, energy humming through his veins. He washed and dressed with care, putting on his best shirt and making sure his hair was combed. Then he walked into town, heading straight for the jeweler's shop that also served as the assayer's office. Mr. Chen, who ran the shop, looked up from his workbench when Owen entered, his weathered face creasing into a smile. "Deputy Walker," he said in his accented English. "What brings you in so early?" "I need a ring," Owen said without preamble. "An engagement ring, the best you have." Mr. Chen's smile widened. "Ah, I see. For Miss Sullivan, yes. The whole town has been waiting for you to come to your senses." Owen felt his ears heat, but he grinned. "That obvious?" "Very obvious," Mr. Chen confirmed. He moved to a locked drawer and pulled out a velvet-lined tray containing several rings. "I do not have much in stock, but these are good quality. Take a look." Owen examined the rings carefully. Most were simple gold bands, a few with small stones. Then his eye caught on one near the back, a delicate gold band with a small emerald set in it, the green stone catching the light beautifully. It reminded him of Rose's eyes. "That one," he said, pointing. Mr. Chen picked it up and handed it to Owen. "Good choice. The emerald came from a mine in Colombia brought here by a merchant 2 years ago. I have been waiting for the right person to buy it." "How much?" Owen asked. Mr. Chen named a price that made Owen wince internally, but he nodded. It would take a chunk of his savings, but Rose was worth every penny and more. He paid, tucking the small box carefully into his vest pocket. His next stop was the sheriff's office. Sheriff Tom Bradshaw was already there, a grizzled man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a dry sense of humor. He looked up when Owen entered, taking in the deputy's carefully pressed shirt and clean-shaven face, and his eyebrows rose. "Well now," the sheriff said, "you clean up nice, Walker. Special occasion." "I am going to ask Rose Sullivan to marry me," Owen said. "I wanted you to hear it from me first and to ask for your blessing in a way. You have been like family to me since I came to Oroville." The sheriff's face softened. He stood and clapped Owen on the shoulder. "You have my blessing and my congratulations," he said warmly. "Miss Sullivan is a fine woman. You are a lucky man." "I know it," Owen said fervently. "When are you planning to ask her?" "Soon," Owen said. "I want to court her properly for a bit, let everyone see that I am serious, but I do not want to wait too long either." The sheriff nodded approvingly. "Smart. Give it a few weeks. Let the town see you two together so there is no question of impropriety, and then make it official." He paused, then added, "You know you will have to find a bigger place to live if you are getting married. That cabin of yours is fine for a bachelor, but not for a couple starting a life together." Owen had already been thinking about that. "I have some ideas," he said. "There is that piece of land on the edge of town, near the creek. The owner has been wanting to sell. I thought I might buy it and build a proper house." "Good land," the sheriff agreed. "Plenty of space, good water. Do it right and you will have a place to raise a family." Family. The word sent a thrill through Owen. A wife, children, a home he built with his own hands. It was a future he had barely let himself dream about, and now it was within reach. The next few weeks passed in a blur of happiness. Owen courted Rose with single-minded determination, walking her home every evening after she closed her shop, taking her to church on Sundays, sitting with her at town socials. They were chaperoned more often than not, usually by Mrs. Henderson, who had appointed herself their unofficial guardian, but Owen did not mind. He wanted everyone to see that he respected Rose, that his intentions were honorable. In private moments, stolen kisses behind the general store or quiet conversations on her little porch after dark, they planned their future. Rose told him about the kind of home she wanted, simple but comfortable, with big windows to let in light for her sewing. Owen told her about the land he was negotiating to buy, about the house he wanted to build there. They talked about children, both agreeing they wanted several, and about how they would balance Rose's work with family life. "I do not want to give up my sewing," Rose said one evening, her hand in his as they sat on the bench outside her door. "I love the independence it gives me, the sense of purpose." "I would never ask you to," Owen assured her. "We will make it work. Maybe as the children come, we can hire a girl to help you in the shop, or you can take on fewer clients. But your work matters, Rose. I know that." The relief in her eyes told him he had said exactly the right thing. "You are unlike any man I have ever known," she said softly. "I will take that as a compliment," he replied, and kissed her until they were both breathless. 6 weeks after that night when he had found her asleep at his table, Owen decided it was time. He had bought the land, signed the papers, and started clearing it for building. The ring was burning a hole in his pocket, carried with him every day waiting for the right moment. He asked Rose to come with him for a walk on a Sunday afternoon in late November, and she agreed with a smile that said she suspected something was coming. They walked out of town together, Rose's hand tucked in his arm, her green wool dress bright against the brown and gold landscape. The air was crisp and cool, the sky a brilliant blue. Owen led her to the land he had bought, where a few trees grew near the creek and the ground rose gently toward the foothills. "This is it," he said, gesturing to the property. "This is where I want to build our house." Rose looked around, her eyes taking in the setting, and a slow smile spread across her face. "It is beautiful," she said. "You can see the mountains from here and listen to the creek." "I want to build something good," Owen said. "Something solid that will last. I want to make a home here, Rose." "With you?" He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. His heart was pounding, but his voice was steady. "I know I said I wanted to court you properly, and we have done that. The whole town knows I am serious about you. But Rose, I cannot wait any longer to make this official." He let go of her hands long enough to pull the small box from his pocket and opened it, revealing the emerald ring. Rose's breath caught, her hand flying to her mouth, tears already shimmering in her eyes. "Rose Sullivan," Owen said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are the bravest, most beautiful woman I have ever known. You came into my life and turned it upside down in the best possible way. I love you more than I thought I could love anyone, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that to you every single day. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Rose said immediately, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Yes, Owen, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, the emerald catching the afternoon light. Then he was pulling her into his arms and kissing her, pouring everything he felt into it while she clung to him and kissed him back just as fiercely. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying at the same time, Rose held up her hand to admire the ring. "It is beautiful," she said, "and it matches my eyes." "That is why I chose it," Owen admitted. "I saw it and thought of you immediately." They sat together by the creek for a long time, making plans and dreaming out loud. They decided to marry in the spring, giving Owen time to at least get the frame of the house up, and Rose time to make her own wedding dress. It would be a simple ceremony in the town's small church, followed by a celebration at the boarding house. The news of their engagement spread through Oroville like wildfire, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. The townswomen flocked to Rose's shop to offer congratulations and advice, and more than one of the men clapped Owen on the back and told him he was a lucky fellow. Mrs. Henderson cried happy tears and insisted on helping with the wedding preparations. Winter settled over the Sierra Nevada foothills, bringing cold rains and occasional snow. Owen spent every spare moment working on the house, often with help from friends and neighbors. The community came together in the way small towns did, men showing up on their days off to help raise walls and put on the roof, women bringing food and hot coffee. Rose came out whenever she could, even in the cold, to watch the house take shape and offer her opinions on where things should go. By February, the exterior was complete, and Owen had started on the interior work. Rose had helped him design the layout, insisting on a large kitchen with plenty of counter space and a separate room she could use for sewing. They added a parlor, a bedroom for them, and 2 smaller bedrooms for future children. It was modest compared to the grand homes back east, but it was theirs, built with their own hands and the help of their community. As spring approached, the house was finished enough to be livable. Owen moved his meager possessions in and spent his evenings adding finishing touches, sanding floors and building furniture. Rose sewed curtains and linens, embroidering their initials on pillowcases and tablecloths. The anticipation was almost unbearable, both of them counting down the days until the wedding. Finally, on a warm day in late April of 1879, Rose Sullivan became Rose Walker. She wore a dress she had made herself, simple white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs, and carried a bouquet of wildflowers. Owen wore his best suit, his hair slicked back, his hands shaking slightly as he slipped the wedding band on her finger to join her engagement ring. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, the church packed with townspeople who had come to celebrate with them. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife and told Owen he could kiss his bride, the resulting kiss made several of the older ladies fan themselves and whisper about young love. The celebration at the boarding house lasted well into the evening, with food and dancing and toasts to the happy couple. Owen held Rose close as they danced, marveling at the fact that she was his wife now, that he got to take her home to the house they had built together and start their life in earnest. When they finally left the party, sneaking away amid well wishes and good-natured teasing, Owen lifted Rose into the wagon and drove them out to their new home. He carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the middle of their parlor. "Welcome home, Mrs. Walker," he said, his voice full of love and wonder. "Welcome home, Mr. Walker," she replied, and pulled him down for a kiss. Their wedding night was tender and passionate, a discovery of each other without barriers or constraints. Owen was gentle with Rose, mindful that she was innocent, and she was brave and eager in return, trusting him completely. They learned each other in the lamplight, finding pleasure and connection and a deeper love than either had imagined possible. In the morning, Owen woke with Rose curled against his side, her hair spread across his chest, and felt such profound contentment that he had to close his eyes against the intensity of it. This was what happiness felt like, this perfect peace. Their life together fell into a comfortable rhythm. Owen continued his work as deputy, though Sheriff Bradshaw had started talking about retiring in a year or two, and had hinted strongly that Owen should consider running for sheriff. Rose kept her seamstress shop, hiring a local girl named Mary to help her a few days a week so she could spend more time at home. They worked on their property together, planting a garden and fruit trees, building a chicken coop and a small barn for Owen's horse. It was hard work but satisfying, creating something lasting together. In the evenings, they would sit on their porch and watch the sunset over the mountains, talking about their day and their dreams. 6 months after their wedding, in October of 1879, Rose told Owen she was expecting their first child. Owen had been chopping wood when she came out of the house, her face flushed and her eyes bright with excitement and nervousness. She had simply said, "I am going to have a baby," and Owen had dropped the axe and swept her into his arms, spinning her around while she laughed and told him to be careful. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, Rose blooming with health and happiness. Owen fussed over her constantly, trying to keep her from lifting anything heavy or working too hard, but Rose was stubborn and insisted she was not fragile. They argued about it good-naturedly, Owen eventually conceding that she knew her own body best, but making her promise to tell him if she needed help. They prepared for the baby together, Owen building a cradle from smooth pine and Rose sewing tiny clothes and blankets. The community rallied around them again, the women organizing a small party to give Rose gifts for the baby, practical things like diapers and receiving blankets and knitted booties. In June of 1880, on a hot afternoon when the cicadas were screaming in the trees, Rose went into labor. Owen rode like mad to fetch the midwife, Mrs. Potter, a capable woman who had delivered half the babies in Oroville. Then he was banished to the parlor to wait while the women took over, his hands clenched together and his heart in his throat every time he heard Rose cry out. It seemed to take forever, though Mrs. Potter later told him it had been a relatively quick first labor, only 8 hours from start to finish. When he finally heard the thin, wailing cry of a newborn, Owen nearly collapsed with relief. Mrs. Potter came out a few minutes later, wiping her hands on her apron and smiling. "You have a son," she announced. "A big, healthy boy, and your wife did beautifully. You can go in now." Owen rushed into the bedroom where Rose lay propped against pillows, looking exhausted but radiant. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in one of the blankets she had made. Owen approached slowly, hardly daring to breathe, and looked down at his son. The baby was red and wrinkled, with a shock of dark hair and a scrunched-up face. He was also the most beautiful thing Owen had ever seen, aside from his mother. Owen sat carefully on the edge of the bed, one arm around Rose, and reached out to touch the baby's tiny hand. Miniature fingers closed around his much larger one, gripping with surprising strength, and Owen felt his eyes burn with tears. "He is perfect," Owen whispered. "You are amazing, Rose. Thank you. Thank you for him for this." Rose smiled tiredly and leaned her head on Owen's shoulder. "What should we name him?" she asked. They had discussed names but had not settled on anything definite. Now, looking at his son, Owen thought of his own father, a good man who had died too young. "What about Oliver?" he suggested. "After my father, Oliver Walker." "Oliver," Rose repeated softly, testing it out. "I like it. Hello, Oliver. Welcome to the world, little one." The baby made a soft cooing sound, already settling into sleep, secure and warm in his mother's arms. Owen sat with his wife and newborn son, feeling like his heart might burst from the love and gratitude flooding through him. The first year of Oliver's life was a blur of sleepless nights and milestones, of first smiles and first teeth. Owen proved to be a devoted father, getting up for nighttime feedings and walking the floor with the baby when he was fussy. Rose adjusted to motherhood with grace, though she admitted to Owen in private that she sometimes felt overwhelmed by the sheer responsibility of caring for a tiny human. "You are doing wonderfully," Owen would assure her, kissing her forehead. "Oliver is lucky to have you as his mother." When Oliver was just over a year old, Sheriff Bradshaw made good on his plan to retire. He recommended Owen as his replacement, and the town council agreed without hesitation. Owen was sworn in as Sheriff of Oroville in August of 1881, a promotion that came with a modest raise in salary and significantly more responsibility. Rose was proud of him, even as she worried about the additional danger his new position might bring. "Just promise me you will be careful," she said on his first day as sheriff, adjusting his badge with gentle fingers. "Come home to us every night." "I promise," Owen said, and meant it with everything in him. Life continued busy and full. In the spring of 1882, Rose told Owen she was expecting again. This time Owen was prepared, or at least he thought he was. Their daughter was born in December of that year, during a rare snowstorm that blanketed Oroville in white. She was smaller than Oliver had been, with wisps of auburn hair like her mother and green eyes that would eventually match. They named her Rachel, and Oliver, now 2.5, was fascinated by his baby sister. He would stand by her cradle and sing to her in his toddler voice, nonsensical songs that nevertheless seemed to soothe her. Owen and Rose watched their children together, marveling at the family they had created. 2 years later, in 1884, they had another son, whom they named Orson. And 3 years after that, in 1887, their youngest child was born, another daughter they named Ruth. Their house, which had seemed spacious when they first built it, now felt full to bursting with the noise and chaos of 4 children. Owen added on to the house, building 2 more bedrooms and expanding the kitchen. Rose had to give up her shop in town, the demands of 4 young children making it impossible to maintain, but she took in sewing at home and seemed content with the arrangement. Mary, who had worked in Rose's shop, came out to the house 3 times a week to help with the children and the housework, and became almost a part of the family. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and celebrations. Owen was re-elected sheriff twice more, respected by the community for his fairness and integrity. Rose became known not just for her sewing skills but for her kindness, always ready to help a neighbor in need or take in a family struggling through hard times. Their children grew. Oliver proved to be serious and studious, with a talent for numbers that suggested he might become a banker or accountant someday. Rachel was artistic, always drawing or painting, and had a gentle nature that drew people to her. Orson was adventurous and fearless, climbing everything he could and giving his parents regular heart attacks with his antics. Ruth, the baby, was quiet and observant, watching everything with wide eyes and surprising them with her insights. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1889, Owen and Rose left the children with Mary and her husband for the weekend and took a trip to San Francisco to visit Owen's sister. It was the first time they had been alone together, really alone, in years. They stayed in a modest hotel and walked the busy streets hand in hand, marveling at how much the city had grown and how different it was from their quiet life in Oroville. Owen's sister, Margaret, had aged well, her husband successful in his business ventures. Their children, 3 in total now, were polite and well-dressed, speaking with city accents. Margaret welcomed Rose warmly, the 2 women taking to each other immediately, and they spent hours talking while Owen caught up with his brother-in-law. On their last evening in the city, Owen and Rose found themselves alone in their hotel room, the window open to let in the cool night air and the distant sounds of the city below. Rose had been quiet during dinner, thoughtful, and now she turned to Owen with a serious expression. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "This life we have built, it is so different from what you might have had if you had stayed single or married someone less complicated." Owen stared at her, shocked. "Regret it?" he repeated. "Rose, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You and our children are my entire world. How could I possibly regret any of it?" "I just wonder sometimes," she said softly. "I pulled you into my orbit without really asking if it was what you wanted. I showed up at your cabin and made dinner and fell asleep at your table, and everything changed after that." Owen pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "That night changed my life," he agreed, "but it changed it for the better in every possible way. Rose, I love you more now than I did when I married you, and I loved you an almost unbearable amount then. Every day with you has been a gift. Every challenge we have faced together and come out stronger. Our children are healthy and happy, our life is good, and I would not trade it for anything in the world." Rose clung to him, her face buried in his chest. "I love you too," she whispered. "So much it scares me sometimes." "Then we will be scared together," Owen said, and kissed her until the doubts faded from her eyes. They returned home to Oroville rejuvenated, the time away having reminded them that they were not just parents and homeowners and community members, but also husband and wife, partners who had chosen each other and continued to choose each other every day. The 1890s brought changes. The country was evolving, the wild frontier of their youth becoming more settled and civilized. Railroads crisscrossed the nation, bringing goods and people to even remote areas. Oroville grew, new businesses opening, more families settling. The mining industry that had built the town began to decline as the easily accessible gold played out, but agriculture and logging took its place. Owen saw his work as sheriff change too. There were fewer gunfights and robberies, more disputes over property lines and cattle. He hired 2 deputies to help him, both young men he trained carefully in the importance of fairness and de-escalation. He wanted law enforcement in Oroville to be something the community trusted and respected, not feared. In 1895, Oliver graduated from the small school in town at the top of his class. He had been accepted to a college in Sacramento, a huge achievement that filled Owen and Rose with pride and a bittersweet ache at the thought of him leaving. On the day they took him to catch the train, Rose cried openly, and Oliver, now 18 and taller than his father, hugged her tight and promised to write every week. "You take care of your mother and your sisters and brother," Oliver told Owen seriously. "I will be home for holidays." "I know you will," Owen said, clapping his son on the shoulder. "Make us proud, son, though you already have." Watching the train pull away with his firstborn on it was one of the hardest things Owen had ever done. Rose pressed against his side, tears streaming down her face, and Owen held her while their other children clustered around them. But there was pride mixed with the sadness. They had raised a good young man, given him opportunities and love and support, and now he was going out into the world to make his own way. The house felt emptier without Oliver, but life went on. Rachel was 16 now and showing real talent as an artist. A teacher in town had taken her under his wing, teaching her techniques and encouraging her to pursue her passion. Orson, at 14, had decided he wanted to be a rancher and spent every spare moment working at a neighboring ranch, learning about cattle and horses. Ruth, at 11, had developed a love of books and could often be found curled up somewhere reading, lost in other worlds. In 1898, on a warm evening in June, Owen and Rose celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. Their children, with the help of Mary and several neighbors, threw them a surprise party at the house. Oliver came home from college for the occasion, taller and more confident, but still their boy at heart. The yard was strung with lanterns, tables laden with food, and it seemed like half of Oroville had turned out to celebrate with them. At one point in the evening, Sheriff Tom Bradshaw, now in his 70s and retired but still sharp, stood up and called for everyone's attention. "I want to say a few words about these two," he said, gesturing to Owen and Rose. 20 years ago, a young deputy came to me and said he was going to marry a woman who had fallen asleep at his table waiting for him. I knew right then that he was a goner." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Owen grinned and Rose blushed. "But more than that," Bradshaw continued, his voice turning serious, "I knew they were going to be something special, and I was right. Owen and Rose Walker have built not just a marriage and a family, but a cornerstone of this community. They have shown us what it means to face life with courage and love, to build something lasting, to raise children who will make the world better. I am honored to call them friends, and I raise my glass to many more years of happiness for them both." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Owen stood and pulled Rose up with him, his arm around her waist. She looked up at him, her green eyes still as bright and beautiful as they had been that first day in her shop, and Owen felt the same rush of love and gratitude he had felt 100 times before. "Speech," someone called out. Owen laughed. "All right," he said, raising his voice to be heard. "I am not much for speeches, but I will say this. 20 years ago I found this woman asleep at my table. She had made dinner and waited for hours because there had been a mining accident and I was late. That night changed everything for me. Rose, you have given me a life beyond anything I dreamed possible. You have given me love, partnership, 4 incredible children, and a reason to be the best man I can be. I look forward to another 20 years and then another after that, for as long as we are granted. I love you." Rose was crying openly now, happy tears that she did not bother to wipe away. "I love you too," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You are my home, Owen Walker. You always have been." They kissed to the sound of cheers and wolf whistles from their children and friends. The party continued late into the night, full of laughter and music and joy. The years that followed brought the inevitable changes of time. In 1900, Owen turned 48 and decided it was time to retire from being sheriff. He had served Oroville for nearly 20 years in that role, and he was ready to pass the torch to someone younger. One of his deputies, a good man named James Crawford, was elected as the new sheriff, and Owen settled into a quieter life. He and Rose focused on their property, expanding their garden and orchard, selling produce at the local market. They traveled occasionally, visiting Oliver in Sacramento, where he now worked as an accountant, going to San Francisco to see Margaret and her family, taking a trip to the coast, just the two of them, to watch the Pacific Ocean and marvel at its vastness. Their children married and started families of their own. Oliver wed a lovely woman named Catherine in 1902, and they gave Owen and Rose their first grandchild, a boy named Thomas, in 1903. Rachel married a fellow artist in 1904, a quiet man who adored her, and they moved to San Francisco where she could study and work seriously at her craft. Orson bought land near Oroville and started his own ranch in 1906, marrying a rancher's daughter who was as tough and capable as he was. Ruth, the baby, went to college in 1907, one of the few women to do so, studying to become a teacher. Owen and Rose became grandparents multiple times over, their house once again filled with the sounds of children during holidays and visits. They were content in a way that went bone deep, the kind of satisfaction that came from a life well lived and shared with the person you loved most in the world. On a spring evening in 1909, 30 years after Owen had found Rose asleep at his table, they sat together on their porch watching the sunset. Owen was 62 now, his dark hair thoroughly streaked with gray, but still strong and healthy. Rose was 58, lines around her eyes and mouth that came from a lifetime of smiling. Her auburn hair faded but her spirit as bright as ever. "You remember that night?" Rose asked suddenly. "When I fell asleep at your table?" Owen smiled. "Every detail," he said. "You had made chicken and bread and waited for hours. I came home filthy from the mine rescue and found you there, and I knew in that moment that my life was about to change. I was so nervous," Rose admitted. "I had never done anything so forward in my life. Coming to your home, cooking for you, making it clear how I felt. I was terrified you would think I was improper or too bold." "I thought you were the bravest woman I had ever met," Owen said. "And I still do." Rose leaned her head on his shoulder, a gesture they had shared thousands of times over the decades. "We built a good life together," she said softly. "The best life," Owen agreed. "Full of love and family and purpose. I would not change a single thing." "Not even the hard parts?" Rose asked. "The times we struggled or fought or worried?" "Not even those," Owen said firmly. "Because they taught us how to be stronger together. Every challenge we faced made us more certain of each other, more committed to this life we were building." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. From inside the house, they could hear their granddaughter Emily, Oliver's second child, playing with Ruth's voice raised in laughter at something the little girl had said. "I would do it all again," Rose murmured. "Fall in love with you, follow you west, build this life. Every single moment." Owen turned and kissed her temple, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair and skin. "So would I," he said, 1,000 times over. As darkness fell and the stars began to appear one by one in the vast California sky, Owen Walker held his wife close and counted his blessings. He had started out as a lawman looking for purpose in a rough frontier town, and he had found so much more than he had ever imagined possible. He had found love that transformed him, a partner who challenged and supported him, a family that filled his days with joy and meaning. All because of one night 30 years ago when he had come home late and found a brave, beautiful woman asleep at his table, waiting for him. That moment had been the beginning of everything good in his life, and he thanked God for it every single day. Their love story had been written in the Wild West, shaped by hard work and honest affection, and it would endure as long as they both lived and beyond, passed down through their children and grandchildren as an example of what real, lasting love looked like. Owen and Rose Walker lived out their days in the house they had built together, surrounded by family and community, secure in the knowledge that they had found something precious and rare. They had found each other, and in doing so, they had found home.